So welcome everyone to session number 13 on experiencing no self. It's quite the journey we've had together as we explore these no self teachings. I'm calling this one Evoking Awakened Engagement with Life, which wasn't the original title, interestingly enough. As I was typing in the title in the chipmunk email that I sent out, that's what came out. It was called something else entirely. I think it was called the paradox of being, which kind of sounds more academic or something. I don't know, but it is a paradox. But I'm not going to be academic, so I thought this is more applied, that we're evoking and abiding in this still aware presence as we then engage with the world. So we've explored, we started out exploring, transcending the egoic mind, that self-referencing, maybe self-centered little me. So transcending that and seeing the even the falling away of chunks of that. And I hope you're experiencing that, firsthand as you engage with these practices, that you see little pieces kind of falling away. And it might not, it's not going to be like a big, a big deal. In fact, you might not even notice until you go and do something that you're used to doing, and you kind of go, oh, why did I do that? Or it just doesn't interest me anymore. All these little egoic activities, it just kind of, your interest in them just kind of fades, right? In fact, you can get to a point where you really don't know what to do when you get up in the morning. Right? You just kind of, if so much of one's life was involved in egoic, little me activities, and when those start to fall away, you could have that kind of be in limbo in a sense. So your orientation, because the ego is can be one's orientation and motivation in the world, right? The personal will and the ego, and when that falls away, it can feel like you then don't have an orientation. So you almost have to to reorient yourself in some way. And we find that reorientation from this sensing into this still aware presence that I was speaking about in the guided meditation. And, the last couple of weeks we talked about, and we did, practices that are meant to evoke a sense of this by resting our attention in the heart space, that we awaken kind of the true heart's capacity to experience and to perceive connection, or to perceive the intimacy with 10,000 things, the intimacy with everything. We've been evoking that, resting there, and abiding there. The more we that is the place from which we operate, that becomes our orientation, you could say. So then our humanness, which is still there, right? And you still have this mind and body. It's not like you transcend the ego and then, poof, you disappear, right? You're still there. There's still this mind body, this human being that's still there. And but from that place, your humanness is kind of a vessel through which the consciousness or realization functions through. If you get a sense of that, this something else is then now functioning through you, as you. It's probably a better word, functioning as you. So there's a natural pull to express life. This is consciousness expressing itself in your life. So this practice isn't about, transcending, getting to a nice transcendent place or blissful place and then kind of distracting ourselves from life. It's, as we've talked about in the past, it's got nothing to do with that. It's about abiding in that place and then living on this earth. It's not a means of escape. It's a means of engaging with life. And it's something that's there all the time. This is the astonishing thing, is it's this silent, still, aware presence is there all the time. And it wanting to express itself. It gets it gets veiled, I guess, is clouded over by really the trance of the egoic trance that we live in. So this urge for kind of truth, you could call it, to express itself in an embodied human becomes stronger and stronger and stronger as we abide in that place, which isn't really a place, as we abide in our true nature. So this is where we engage with the world, and this question comes up often in the group. When we talk about different aspects of the practice, what will this mean to my engagement with issues that are important to me in the world? And I don't have an answer for that. That's what you'll see, what becomes a natural and spontaneous outflow of compassionate activity. You can only see that for yourself. We're all unique human beings. It's funny, you're transcending you're transcending all this egoic stuff, which you think is what makes you unique. Right? And so, but you think, well, okay, now I'm touching into unity, so that we're kind of all the same in that sense. We're all consciousness. But at the same time, your appearance in the world is very unique human expression. This mind body is, and that's why I think I called it the paradox of being. This mind body is still expressing itself in the world, but from a place of beingness rather than a place of me, a little me. So we're all the direct manifestations and expressions of interconnectedness, right? So we're not isolated pieces, but at the same time we are pieces, right? We are pieces in a sense. So when we see this and we act in the world from this still place, the possibilities for action in the world just increase immensely. The potential is infinite, as does our responsibility. You really see the importance of personal responsibility. So when we act from our true nature, this sense of our true nature, aware presence, all these words are just pointers. So our actions in the world come out of this sense of unlimited wholeness, where nothing's left out. So you're experiencing yourself as everything, and you're experiencing yourself as a piece of everything at the same time. And that's the paradox of being that I had in my previous title. And by understanding that and appreciating that, we can really engage in the world from that place. So you don't only experience yourself as a piece, but you also experience yourself as everything at the same time. There's no duality in a sense. So this is a paradox, right? It's a paradox again, to the mind at least. It's not really a paradox, but it's a paradox to the mind. It just means the mind can't figure it out, right? It's another, so I guess a polite way of saying the mind can't figure it out. So it's a paradox. So we're part of the whole, and at the same time, we're individuals. We're unique individuals. So you don't lose your individuality when the egoic mind falls away. Isn't that interesting? It's just not the self-centered me falls away, but you still have a personality. So you don't disappear, and neither does your personality. The personality's still there. You know, and the beauty of all those unique personalities and individuals. So the paradox, I guess it could be stated another way, is that we are simultaneously one and unique individuals at the same time, unique and valuable individuals at the same time, that we're part of the whole. We are the whole. Call this kind of a true autonomy, a liberating autonomy that has an infinite capacity to express itself through its humanity as a liberating presence in the world. Yeah. So we've left our identification with the human dimension behind when we've transcended the ego. Right? We've left our identification with that behind. But we still have a body and mind that's constantly becoming and begoing. Constantly arising and fading away, becoming and begoing. I like that. Lama Surdas, I did a day-long, it's a day-long or a weekend? I can't even remember now. It was like last week. A day-long, no, it was a weekend retreat with him, and he uses this term becoming and begoing a lot. And I really like that notion of becoming and begoing. So we're constantly becoming and begoing, right? But we've left our identification with that behind. Still an individual here, though. And there's still wholeness here. So we've transcended the ego and experienced unity. And that's what's the paradox to the mind. We've dismantled our attachment to the self, the small self. Right? And that can feel like it's dismantling our individuality, but it's not. We're not. That's not what we're doing. Our uniqueness as human individuals still remains. Although now, right now, we know it as a conditioned appearance and not who we truly are. There's a big difference between knowing it as a conditioned appearance and not who we truly are, and thinking that it is who we are. Big difference. So there's an interesting sutra that's chanted in Zen temples. I don't know if any of you have ever been to a Zen temple. As you know, I've lived with the Thich Nhat Hanh monks, or they're Zen. They're Zen, and spent some time with them. And there's something that they often chant, and one of the lines in it at the time kind of confused the mind, confused my mind. It was to encounter the absolute is not yet enlightenment. To encounter the absolute is not yet enlightenment. So what does that mean? To the egoic mind, that's it, right? I've encountered the absolute. That's the job's done. No more suffering. Whoopee. I've gone the path, and I've made it. And then but that's not it. In fact, I would say it's 50%. If we wanted to put a number on it, it's kind of 50%. So the chance, it's actually very interesting. It also says, it goes on to say, so it says to encounter the absolute is not yet enlightenment. Each thing has its own intrinsic value and is related to everything else in function and position. Ordinary life fits the absolute as a box and its lid. The absolute works together with the relative like two arrows meeting in the air. So as you know, the relative, the two truths is the relative is, our conditioned appearances in the world, right? That's the relative world. And on the ultimate, like two arrows in the air. So the what's left is now living this touching of the absolute in the world. That's what is in enlightenment. Is the light is now shining on everything we do in the world. So we're seeing the true nature of everything we encounter as beautiful and peaceful. This is impossible for the egoic mind. To see beauty and peace in every one and everything. So a real test of this is seeing how you relate to somebody you despise or dislike or find challenging. It's a real test of enlightenment. So can you see how you might behold the true nature of somebody that you intensely dislike? It might be a political figure, a relative, I don't know, Brussels sprouts, right? Can you see how you might behold somebody or something that you intensely dislike? And it doesn't mean you're going to suddenly, if it's a person, that you're suddenly going to agree with that person, right? Or if it's Brussels sprouts, it doesn't mean you're suddenly going to like the taste of Brussels sprouts. Not to diss Brussels sprouts, but it's I had to pick something, right? Um, you can still disagree, right, and still not enjoy the taste of Brussels sprouts. But it's different to disagree and see your egoic version of their wrongness, right? It's one way, and to see that they're also an expression of true nature, with the potential to be conscious of that or unconscious of that. So it's important to remember that you can't really be other than you are. And the same holds true for everybody else. My teacher, Matthew Flickstein, used to say, probably still does, that Adolf Hitler was just doing the best he could, given his conditioning. It was a Jewish man saying this. That's sort of how far he was kind of stating an extreme example, right? So I know I'm challenging you here, but I'm challenging you to see the implications of living from this knowing. It's nothing short of giving up sort of all your attachments and all your beliefs and opinions and all this egoic stuff. Doesn't mean you'll never have another belief or opinion, but you're giving up all this attachment to this egoic soup, you might call it. So you're living this expression. You're seeing with the eyes of the infinite. I was going to call one of the talks that, seeing with the eyes of the infinite, or the eyes of true nature, the eyes of spirit, and also becoming an embodied expression of it. So everything is true nature, always complete and always unfolding. And then you're part of that piece, you're a piece of that. So you're clear. As we become clearer and clearer, we become a clearer and clearer embodiment of the infinite, of wholeness. So we, in a sense, also embrace our imperfections. Have people heard of Anthony DeMello? It's a wonderful priest. Way back, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I read chapters of his little book of love, I think it's called. It's just a little tiny booklet. People remember that, that were there that long ago. And a wonderful, wonderful little book. I'll bring that out at some point, actually, to and read pieces of it. And he started a retreat, and he's a Catholic. I can't remember which lineage, but a Catholic priest. He's passed away, but he started a retreat some years ago, and he said, "Let's just get something straight before we start our retreat. I'm an ass, you're an ass. Now let's get on with it." And so it's kind of pointing to this aspect of embracing our imperfections. So to embrace and find autonomy is really what this engagement with life is, what I'm talking about. So I'm going to talk a bit, and probably that's a bit philosophical up till this point. So I want to talk a little bit about evoking this engagement with life. And I pointed to that fairly directly in the guided meditation. Excuse me. My mouth is still a little frozen because I got some stuff done on my teeth. And so if I start to drool and drool down the side, that's why I keep going like this. But that is just freezing. They didn't do anything that affects my brain, just my mouth. So where was I? Engaging with evoking and awakened engagement with life. So how does form, right? So we're form. You heard the expression, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. It's part of the Heart Sutra, beautiful sutra. If you haven't read the Heart Sutra, one of the lines in the Heart Sutra is form is emptiness. So that's what we've been discovering, right? That you're empty of a self. And emptiness is form. So now we're discovering how emptiness also expresses itself as form. So how does form, these individual mind bodies, go back into the world and engage with other forms and things, right? How do we navigate this world of confusion and in many ways insanity through the eyes of the divine or the infinite? Right? So that's really the very practical question that we could address here. And there's really no how, but I'll use that. I mean, there's no technique I can teach you in a sense, but I'll give you some pointers and some guideposts. So you could call it a kind of impersonal engagement. If you kind of think you've been human beings by default through the egoic trance, you have a personal engagement with the world, right? It's all about me, right? I like this, I don't like that, I want more of this, I want less of that. It's just this constant negotiation with reality to maximize happiness, perhaps, of me. So this other way of engaging with the world is, you could call it an impersonal engagement. So it's not about me. We start to realize that our own lives are actually not about us, right? It's about everyone else. So the reason for doing becomes about the whole. It's not a personal thing anymore. It's about the whole. How does this impact the whole? I mean, you still do, and this may sound confusing, but you still do egoic things because you still survive, right? I mean, the ego, this is a whole other talk probably. The ego does have some use, even though we've transcended it and it's fallen away. Without it, you'd probably just walk out in front of a train. Well, not in Ottawa, but because none of the trains are running. But so you'd walk out in front of a car in Ottawa, and that'd be the end of your enlightened experience, enlightenment journey. So you do the ego has these usefulness. So let's just put that, we'll put that in another little box for now. But the reason for your doing beyond this kind of your survival aspects are not a personal thing. They're about the whole, right? They're about the whole, and it's not because you want to do good. You want to be seen as doing good. It's It's a natural unfolding of the whole expressing itself to the for the benefit of the whole, if that makes sense. And this requires a real deep honesty, openness, a curiosity, and it can be tricky. It can be very tricky. It's very delicate. It's very delicate and tricky, I guess you could say, because we're bringing this mind and body back into the world, right? Mind. So the mind can very easily get confused and lost. That's the tricky part about it. As soon as you engage the mind back into the world, it's very easy to get lost in the mind. So it can be very tricky and very delicate. But this is what the practice is. This is what the Zen Sutra was talking about in terms of what enlightenment is. It's this other aspect of bringing this into life. It's wisdom. Again, what Zen they call prajna, heart wisdom. So, being able to touch into your beingness and your aware presence isn't much use without prajna, without heart wisdom. Right? So you've touched the absolute, but you're not yet enlightened, according to that sutra. Saint Teresa of Avila, another wonderful Catholic, I would say enlightened being, said, and I researched it a little bit more, because every time I read this, I research it to see if it's actually true, because it's so astonishing that she would say this. But she said, "May God protect me from stupid saints." May God protect me from stupid saints. So that's saints, who've touched the absolute likely, but they just don't have the prajna operating, right? They don't know how to operate from that touching in the world. And the word stupid of course, it's a translation, gets translated as different words, but it's misguided and so on kind of idea. So the wisdom function must be active. And as I said, this is tricky. It's difficult. Bringing the mind back into the world from a sense of beingness. So there's a danger. We get confused, right? We get lost. But as we practice and we engage this more and more, we learn to kind of use the mind as a tool as we engage with the world, rather than being a tool to the mind. We're just kind of thrown about by the mind. We learn about how to engage the mind, to focus the mind as a tool from this place of being. Right? And so in order to do this, you need an anchor, because you will get confused, you will get lost. So we need an anchor, and the anchor is really, you could call it beingness, or this aware presence. It's the willingness and the ability to abide in that place which is untouched by the mind, which is before mind, which is this presence. So it's the willingness and the ability to anchor ourselves in that, and I'll call it a place. So we can abide in still, quiet, aware presence that is always there. Right? It's the background behind all the noise of life. It's always there. So it's this beingness. From that place, we can step into the confusion of the world. We bring mind and body into the confusion of the world. Into the world where we're mostly relating to egoic minds, right? People who may be unconscious of what they're doing. We can get very quickly very lost and confused. But from this place, a real clear, intuitive and clear intention to act can blossom, can flower, and manifest. Right? It's clear because it's not directed by the egoic self, by self-referential egoic thought, but rather from wholeness. And I've encountered this many times in my teaching. And really that's where I kind of began to evoke this aspect, to evoke the sense of beingness as I engaged with people in practice groups in my teaching. Because I not only had my, before you practice and, I have questions, right? But now I had all these questions from other practitioners, from students, right? So there's 30 sets of questions coming up instead of one. So people ask questions, and very early on, the questions I'd search the mind for answers, and I'd kind of come up with something. Then I realized the answers really had to come from an empty place. From an empty place. So I put that sign on my door, empty mind, to remind me that the answers come from an empty mind, an empty place, and not from the egoic mind. And you've all experienced this, okay? We've all experienced this. Someone asks you a question, right? And an answer spontaneously flows out of your mouth. Right? You've had this experience. Everybody, I think, has. Just the answer just spontaneously and naturally flows. And you kind of go, wow, I didn't know that I knew that. That happens a lot. You say something that you didn't even know that you knew. This is the operation of prajna, or heart wisdom. And this is what we evoke and abide in this empty place, in emptiness, and allow the answers to spontaneously and naturally flow. And it also involves a lot of trust. Trust in emergence. That the right thing to say will emerge. And the right thing to say might be nothing. The egoic mind hates that. It's nothing to do with you just sitting there saying nothing. That's a real challenge, because you can't just sit there and say nothing and stare. You got to. But sometimes silence is what's most appropriate in that moment. Trusting emergence. A big element of trust in this. So it's spontaneous, it's natural, it doesn't come from forethought. So when you're listening to somebody speak, there's another kind of little test of it. Are you thinking about what you're going to say? next? Or are you deeply listening to what that person's saying and you're trusting that what needs to be said or what is helpful or what is will emerge when the person stops speaking? So that's kind of what I'm pointing at. It comes from an empty place, not from forethought, not from what should I say, and all the egoic stuff that goes on. It's a kind of a spontaneous a great amount of faith is another word, and faith in the unknown, so that the known can speak itself. You really become a conduit. You're really not. You really don't have any more control over your life. You just kind of become this conduit. So, no, I don't. John Kabat-Zinn has a funny saying. It's not coming to me right now, but this practice. It involves giving up of everything, and this is kind of what he's pointing to. And this is kind of concretely how you could say it's done, or how to do it. So how do you make decisions? You take the mind into beingness and find answers. So we've done that with our contemplations and inquiry, right? I pose a question, I say, just that rest in awareness, that rest in the beingness. If the mind starts to try to, spreadsheet it, just say, so let it go. Just let the question just kind of rest in beingness. Wisdom comes out of that. It's a challenge, right? It's tricky because the tendency is to go back into the mind, venture back into the mind, and then there's a tendency to get lost in thought. So that's the tricky part of it. So there's no technique in a sense. It's you go inside, you sit with the question, you bring a sense of curiosity, and you just rest in the stillness, and wisdom comes out of this. And the challenge is to simply rest and stay curious. Notice when grasping arises, right? Just notice it. Not resisting that either, just noticing. So we can just take this into our daily life. Yeah, I'll open, my next heading is your life is not yours anymore, but that's kind of what I already said. So this is really what it's all about. This practice, ultimately what it's all about. So yeah, I'll open it up for any any questions people might have. And recognizing that this comes from that evoking of the true heart, right? That practice that I invited you to engage in for the past 2 weeks of evoking the true heart. Yeah, Jason.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you everybody for being here tonight and for this continuing this excellent series. The last 2 weeks, I've really noticed I was doing that big heart practice, and one thing that I found was coming up was observing my own thinking. And I was going in there, like, because my thoughts would often come in, and I was there was kind of a natural, like, almost noticing like the moment of when my mind would start conceptualizing things, and like perceiving that moment when that my mind just wants to make this thing into a concept rather than just kind of falling into it. And once I was, for some reason, I realized that was happening, there could just be like a natural letting go of the concepts and just kind of falling into this kind of like state of, or it did feel expansive, but I wasn't thinking about the big heart anymore. It would just kind of happen. And I was wondering if you could maybe, and then circumstances in my life led me to be reading the Diamond Sutra, which I thought was very uncannily kind of timely with this whole thing of concepts. But I'm just wondering if you could touch a bit on your own experiences with concepts and how, like, we need concepts in order to function in our life, but also how you can kind of flow through life. And I've been experimenting this last couple of weeks, flow through life, kind of not identifying with those concepts so much, with concepts, but still having to use concepts in order to survive and interact with other people and be in a society.
I think you answered the question. I'm not sure. You kind of answered the question. That happens often when people ask questions, right? They let go into the question, and then the answer kind of emerges in the question, because we don't identify with the concepts, but we can use concepts, right? So this is the tricky part, because we're disidentifying with the egoic mind, right? And most of what the mind does is activity of the ego when we're identified with the ego. And it uses a lot of concepts in doing so. So we disidentify with that. And then, but what we're talking about today is now we're bringing the mind as a tool back into the world. And the mind's, as a tool, one of the mind's most powerful, amazing, it's like a magic trick, really. The mind's ability to create categories and concepts and, abstract things, right? And that can have a usefulness, right? So it's just kind of, again, using the mind as a tool rather than being what's the word? Than being a burden, than being something that we've identified with and believed as truth, right? That's the other aspect of concepts, is they abstract reality and then we make it a truth. So, this is a bell. The bell concept of it's a useful concept, because I can say, ask somebody to bring me the bell. Otherwise, I'd be saying, can you bring me that round bronze? Oh, wait, there's round as a concept, bronze as a concept. I'd never get the thing. So, basically all words are, in a sense, conceptual. And so we're always using concepts. But this isn't a bell. There's no bellness at all here. So in a sense, it cloaks reality, right? So then we kind of see that aspect of concepts. And once we've seen that, concepts, we can use them as an effective tool. But we really have to see the veiling properties of concepts, how they veil reality and really keep us in our egoic trance. very interesting question, and very deep. And when you started the question too, you mentioned, and this is also important, is the letting go. I don't know, I can't remember the word you use, letting go of the concepts. It's not believing the concepts is another way to put it. Right? Just say, oh, there's conceptual mind. And not believing, oh, the mind will churn out endless concepts. Yeah, so it's nothing wrong with concepts. It's not believing that they represent truth. And seeing their veiling, how they veil reality.
Thank you.
Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say I love all of this. I love it. I look forward to it every week. I'm like, oh. No matter what day I've had, I'm like, oh. Anyway, what I wanted to say based on my personal experience is similar to Jason. I find that for me, I can get cerebral. So the moment I decide to connect to my heart, it becomes an act of doing versus being. So what I also found is, for example, when I'm unintentionally connecting, for example, if I'm in nature, or if I'm dancing, or if I'm listening to music, after the fact, I'm like, oh, I think I was connected to the heart in that moment. But I find personally, when I'm in silence and I say, okay, Ioana, it's time to connect to the big heart, then automatically I'm in the verb state, I'm in the action state, and then I don't drop. I'm just cerebral again. I'm like, okay, am I doing? And I understand everything that you're saying, again, from a conceptual perspective. I just find that for me, it has to happen when I'm not in thinking about it, if that makes any sense. So that's just been my personal experience. But I hope to get to a point where I sit in a dark room and go, okay, connecting to big heart now. And okay, connection any second now. But I just find myself very cerebral at the moment. And as everyone was talking, I was just thinking about, I don't know if anyone ever watched Quantum Leap with, anyway. So he went through like a wormhole, right? And I think it would be cool if I'm like, okay, I'm about to go into a wormhole and have no idea where I'm gonna go. Just releasing, I find, would be good, but something in me is not letting me release. I still want to act. I still want to be. I still want to feel what it feels like to connect to the big heart, and all of those things are getting in my way. So that's just been my personal experience. So thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, or the blue pill.
Yes, we just watched The Matrix, me and my kids. The blue pill. Yes.
Yeah, I had a blue. So yeah, it's the blue pill syndrome. It's also the kind of the seeking, the letting go of the seeker that we talked about. I don't know, week 8 or some week ago. And then, the spiritual seeking can be one of the biggest impediments on this path. And the wanting for to touch these very beautiful places, right? Actually get in the way, as you explained, get in the way of it, because it's the mind that's doing the wanting, right? So you recognize that, because you said it in so many words. You recognize that there's this seeker that's lingering around. So just notice, there's seeking thoughts. It's because there's nothing wrong with seeking thoughts. They only become a problem, right, when they're believed. So, so you sit down and you sit in a room and with the intention of connecting with the big heart, which is always there to connect to. You really don't have to do anything. You just really have to kind of clear the decks or whatever. That makes sense. Open the veil, clear the clouds, and there it is. So the seeking mind's going, okay, what do I got to do? I got to drop down, and then I got to all these things, right? So, and I try to make it simple so that because it is simple, not put too much doing onto it. So if you kind of think, well, how do I connect to the big heart? Well, you get rid of the how, you get rid of the I, and what you're left with is the big heart. It's just there. So yeah, I could probably do some more. We could do some more stuff around seeking, the seeking part of it, because I've come, been working with people long enough that I've really come to the conclusion that this is the biggest impediment. Especially for people that have been at this for a while, it becomes the barrier. So letting go of the seeker, if that makes sense, noticing the seeker. It's okay for the seeker to arise. Hello, dear seeker. They're beautiful. It's a beautiful thought train. As egoic thoughts go, they're the most beautiful. If you're going to get stuck on egoic thoughts, the spiritual seeker thoughts are the bad. They're the nicest. I mean, you want to be compassionate. I want to be kind. Oh, they're beautiful thoughts. So being stuck there is not horrible, but of course it is an impediment to directly touching our true nature. So hi seeker, nice to see you. There you are again. I love you, but it's not like I'm trying to get rid of you or anything, but just not believe in it. I'm just going to be with this simple, already, always present. It's always here. All the seeking simply covers it over. It's always there. So I've said in the past, you're already it. You don't have to build, you don't have to build anything, construct anything, grasp it, try to get anything. In fact, to let go of all that, all the wanting, grasping, getting, pathing, just resting. You can sense it right now with this group, this stillness. It's palpable. Right here, and there's no need for a seeker.